REST APIs are a pretty standard way to build APIs for applications these days. They provide a consistent interface to the entire API, plus REST APIs have much less boilerplate and cruft than systems like SOAP or XML RPC. So you get the same functionality, but in a more clear, concise fashion. You can create an API in Colbox by typing a variation of the Colbox create app command we looked at earlier. You just do Colbox create app, name of your app, and then skeleton equals REST. That REST argument on the end, with that, command box will generate a Colbox app for you using the REST template instead of the default one. There's two main differences when you do this. First, there's no views folder because you don't view the results of an API in a web browser, except for maybe a little bit of testing the GET endpoints. The data is returned as JSON to some other system, like maybe a mobile device, an Angular app, or a different server entirely, but it's not usually viewed in a web browser as a real production way you would use that API. So we don't really deal with HTML output here, just JSON data coming back from your API. The second difference you'll notice is I've added one line to the router CFC file, this line right here, resources, resource equals photo stuff, handler equals photo. That's the magic config piece to build our API. Just like we discussed in the other videos, the router file is where you can do various types of URL rewriting and forwarding and such in your Colbox app. This particular one, resources, is telling our app anytime someone goes to a /photostuff URL endpoint, it's going to use the photo handler. And any other resource calls that we add to this file, and they'll work the same way. So if I have resources /for photo stuff, this goes to the photo handler. If I copy that line, pasted another one in here, and called it something like user stuff, and then said handler equals user, now any URLs in our API that go /API/user stuff, those will be forwarded to the user handler CFC, where they'll be picked up and will execute code in the user handler. You can do this for as many endpoints as you need in your application, for as many handlers as you have in your application. When you add a new entry into your router CFC file, of course, remember to restart your Colbox app so that change gets picked up by the system. That resources call in our router CFC file to photo stuff creates these API endpoints for us. So all we have to do is create the methods in our photo CFC handler with those same names, new, create, show, and so on. So when a user goes to, say, /photos, which is the default, if you will, that will run the photos.index handler in our photo CFC file. If they go to /photos/new, that will run the photos new function in our photo handler. If you go to the /photos URL, but instead of using a GET HTTP connection, you do it with a POST HTTP connection, that will run the photo create method instead of photo index. So this would be like for a GET request. This would be for like a post from, say, a form in your HTML, or maybe a post coming out of a mobile app and that sort of thing. It's the exact same URL that you would go to, but the type of verb is different, and therefore it's going to run a different method in your photo handler, index versus create. Notice down here too, you can tack on IDs to that photos endpoint, photos/ID. Same verb here, get and get. The only difference now is that ID on the end, and the resource router configuration we set up knows that when you tack an ID on the end of it, we don't want to run the index method anymore. Now we want to run the show method in it here instead. You can also do things like combining photos and ID with another keyword on the end of that and get yet another method to run in your event handler. See, these all three are get verb endpoints. They're all going to /photos, but they're all running different events in your handler just based on the little bit of extra information in your URL coming from that API. And this is all automatically configured for you all in Colbox simply by adding that one resources line in your router CFC file and restarting your application. You get all of these endpoints created for you, lined up with these HTTP verbs automatically. You don't have to do any other configuring anywhere else in your system. Simply add that one line to your router CFC file, restart your Colbox app, and you're up and running. Let's go ahead and do a demo of some of those real quick while we're here too. So my endpoint is photo stuff. So if I go to /photostuff/ on ID number and edit, you'll see that matches up with this URL setup right here. Photos, I'm using photo stuff instead of photos, an ID number and edit. That's our URL right there. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our code. Here's our photo handler. And you can see here is our edit endpoint. That looks like this. It's going to run photo edit when we go to a URL that's formatted like that. And you can see in my edit method, we're simply outputting the content, API is used to edit photo, and then I'm drawing that ID number on the screen. So if I do that correctly, we should see photo number 123, and it is in fact looking for photo number 123 there as our endpoint. I can go back here and run any of the methods in here that are set up with HTTP get verbs, so /photos new. In my case, it would be photo stuff /new. Let's go ahead and try that. Photo stuff /new, run it, and now we see new photo was created, came back from our API. Let's see if that is what we expect. And it is. That came out of the new method here. So I could test any of the methods in this handler that use get verbs right here in my browser. For things like post, put, patch, and delete, you would need to use another tool, something like Postman, or maybe a curl command from the command line to test those endpoints. So we can't really demo those in this particular video, but you get the idea. All of this functionality comes for you automatically simply by adding that one line to your router CSV file and following these naming conventions with your URLs. You can learn more about the router CFC file, creating REST APIs, and using routes to build them efficiently on the website at coldbox.ortusbooks.com.